3.
Okay, so back in September, we started talking about planets on the 1st, and this is a follow-up to that meeting. And planets on the 1st is a technique that I have been now, I guess, testing out, playing around with, sharing it with some of my clients and getting feedback, and definitely living it myself for almost 2 years now. And part of my intention around that is to have more of an experience with astrology, because for me, a big part of my path is to get out of my head and to actually be in my body and, you know, living where I'm at and what I'm actually choosing versus what I may know in my intellect. So that's what's kind of got me excited about this technique. I'm going to go back through some of the basics because I'm sure everyone didn't hear the first one, and I don't know how familiar everyone is with it. I want to share that last time we went through the whole piece and Olive volunteered her chart, and then she chose to play around with choosing Saturn first. So when we get further into these slides, I'll be asking her to share her experience, and we'll kind of flesh out how that's looked for her. But a planet on the 1st is simply an artificial chart where we pick a particular planet and then we rotate that to the ascendant. So all the planets stay in their same signs, the aspects stay the same. It's just that we rotate the wheel, if you will, until that planet, if we choose Mars first, for example, until Mars is on the ascendant. And I really like to emphasize that the geophysical moment in a planet first chart, it never occurred. It's something that we're choosing to do. So it's not like our birth chart that really does capture an actual moment in time. This is something that we artificially create to have a new experience of ourselves. I think of it as kind of reshuffling myself. Like Erin was talking about the angles, and I think about them as being my personal north, my personal south, my personal east, my personal west. So I'm in that space, but there's actually room. You know, if I move a little bit this way, the natural cross that I'm in realigns. And I think of it this way with the planets. I use the example sometimes if my whole beingness is like a house, if I've never left my kitchen, it's not that the rest hasn't always existed. It's just that I've only experienced my kitchen, and even less than that, whatever part of my kitchen I chose to stand in or look at. So I get excited about this because it's not anything new. It's just us choosing to turn around and say, wow, I'm going to go stand over here for a while. But it feels totally new, or it can. So it's a conscious choice to experience life through that particular facet. And the one thing about planets first, because we move them to the ascendant, that's a very instinctual subconscious placement. So I would be very curious if anyone plays around with this themselves or has feedback or decides to. I would love it if you would contact me so we could chat about it, because we take an intention, which is in some ways a very, you know, brainy thing to do, to have a more instinctual experience. So it's a strange marriage between I'm deciding to do something and then letting my decision then show itself what it wants to reveal to me. So it's important to remember that we are the filter. You know, wherever we're moving, whatever we're choosing to do, it's all happening in us. So if you liken it to a movie or a play, you're just choosing a new leading character. So, and this is not to reteach what we already all know, but just to kind of make sure we're on the same page in the context of planets first. So what are planets? So I believe planets are just facets of the whole. So each planet represents a part of our psyche. And I also believe that every planet is in every other planet. And that's not to expand upon today, but like I think that, for example, there's a Mars and a Venus function in Jupiter in that part of us. And I say this because for me, it has been helpful to always leave room for more so that I don't label or define or take something and pigeonhole it or make it something that is less than it truly is. Because I believe that everything is always happening, but it's too much for us. So we're biting off pieces that we can work with, but that doesn't mean that something bigger circles upon circles and cycles upon cycles and things within things. They are all happening. So we talk about the planets, and now we want to talk about the ascendant, because in planets first, we're taking a planet and putting it on the ascendant. So the ascendant is the I. It is the primal and instinctual underlying self-image that we create, our identity, how we put ourselves out there in the world. And it's our ego in evolutionary astrology, represented by the moon, that actually defends that image. And so that's a very instinctual, habitual process. We don't think about how our rising sign is always, that part of us is always asking questions, subconscious questions. And so it will trigger things or act out in ways to answer those questions, but we don't recognize that we're actually asking the question, which I find, I get some pleasure how I do a number on myself, and we all do, like with these parts of us. So the ascendant also is who I believe that we are to realize ourselves as, which is something different than we've ever recognized ourselves as in the past. So in some ways, we are learning to be our rising sign. It's instinctual, but it's not something that we have done before, which is why we have to really, from a primal way, sort of be that way to learn what that way is. So everything is instinctually filtered or experienced through the sign or planets on the ascendant. So some of us already have natal planets on the ascendant, and that's already part of that process. How we instinctually filter life comes through that piece. If I have Neptune on the AC, my experience of how I filter life instinctually is going to be very different than someone who doesn't have a planet there at all, or someone who has Saturn. All right, so this is just an example of questions. There's a million more you can come up with, but these instinctual questions. If I'm Aries rising, and I am Aries rising, so this, can I do it? Like, it took me a long time in life to realize that there were a lot of things I didn't want to do in life. I just always needed to know, can I do it? So in any situation, I might be competitive or push myself or do something because the underlying question was, can I do it? Taurus, for example, is, can I survive it? Gemini, can I figure it out? Cancer, am I safe? Cancer could also be, do I belong? Belonging is a big one for Cancer. Leo, am I special? And so forth. You get the idea here. So really feeling into, underneath that instinctual response to life, what is it looking for, asking, or wanting to know? And I think that, all of you can kind of feel it. You don't have to really even think about it too much. You can feel when you're in a situation in life, what comes forth. All right, so even in moving planets to the first, even though we rotate it around, so the one thing that does change when you look at a chart is whatever, so let's say I'm going to move Mars to the first. When Mars moves to the first, whatever sign Mars is in then shows as the rising sign. That's really the only thing that changes as far as in the houses things are in change. The other relationships don't in planets first. But I bring this up because to me, just because I move a planet to the first, the natural rising sign doesn't go away. It's more to me like they become married. So if I'm Aries rising and I move my Mars and Leo to the first, I don't set my Aries rising aside. That's my instinctual process. But now I've chosen to have this Mars and Leo sit right with it. So the intention is, instead of just having my personal East be Aries, now I've chosen to make my personal East include, the Mars in Leo in this particular example. Which is interesting, right? Because if I'm backed into my chart, and if I imagine my right hand is to my East, that means like my right hand, to me, is my dominant hand. What I'm going for, or where I'm coming from or reaching out to, is different. Okay. So how do planets on the first behave? Well, we choose to experience life through this particular facet of our psyche. I think maybe a better question is, how do I behave when I choose to experience life through the part of me represented by whatever planet it is? So I spent more than a year doing Venus first, which is really different for me because I've got Aries rising. Mars is the ruling planet in my chart. And that for that time that I chose Venus first, I big shifts happened in my life. A lot of physical shifts, which are interesting. I put on some weight. I got curvier. I also got just softer in general. But it wasn't just that. It then became questions around, is it yummy? Do I like it? And then that started to even become more important to me than can I do it, or, is there a fight in it? And it's not that that part wasn't there, because those pieces, I could feel them kicking around. It's just that the place that I chose to stand in was my femininity. And by that, I mean my receptivity, my ability to receive what life has to give me instead of to go out and fight and get something all the time. Changed a lot of things for me. That's what's gotten me super excited about sharing this with clients. And I spoke at NORWAC in 2016 on this. I'll be speaking at UAC in 2018 on this as well, because for me it works. Like, it lets me have more of me if I want it. And boy, I tell you what though, with this, when you choose to do this, if you don't want it, you'll know that right away. And sometimes that's fantastic, because we can think we want lots of things, but until we actually choose and see, then we recognize, wow, I really don't want anything to do with my Venus first. Give me my Mars back. So anyhow, the AC, or the I, which is me, the identity piece, is now wedded with the planet, and everything becomes instinctually filtered through that planet. So some of the questions I think about is, how does that part of me see, think, and feel? In other words, if the lead character is going to be my Mercury, how is that now thinking and feeling in all the contexts and circumstances in my daily life? And then what new subconscious questions am I asking without thinking about it? Ones that maybe I wasn't before. And then how does this part experience me in relationship with other parts of me? And that's where aspects become a whole new thing as well, because it's all the same aspects, but if I've shifted a little bit to the right in me, all those aspects they feel differently. If I choose Venus first, my Pluto-Venus square feels a lot different than when I was not Venus first. So there's all these things you can play with this technique. In counseling therapeutic use, I specifically love it for strengthening atrophied facets of us. So I love using skip steps, retrograde planets, planets conjunct the North Node, anything that you can see maybe just hasn't had the attention, or maybe we had to put it on hold in past lives, if that's your belief, or it's just something new we're trying to flesh out more or learn in a new way. But those are some things that I use when I'm looking at a chart specifically with a client. I can say, hey, wow, we've just now spent the last 30 minutes talking about how you can assert yourself and go for what you want. Let's now talk about Mars, because that's a great idea to choose Mars first. And it gives us a focal point and specifics to work with, which I find sometimes is very useful. Erin also talked in her just previously about how we oftentimes diagnose, but we don't prescribe something. And I'm not a big believer in giving a specific prescription, because you and every other person knows best what they need, but to offer some tools is awesome. And to get excited about one part of yourself, especially if it's a part that you have been like feeling rising up. Like if it is Mars, maybe you've been getting more angry than ever. And then instead of making that a problem, you can get excited about, wow, what does that mean? My anger is rising. There's more vitality for me. How can I choose it? So then I also think that this technique increases alignment between the parts of ourselves. So these, we won't go through all of these in detail right now, because I really want to talk about Saturn and have Olive share her real experiences with Saturn. But on my website, I have these tools available. I have a whole section for planets first, so you can get that there as well. But these are some examples of the questions, the more subconscious instinctual questions that come through each of these planets. When you're starting to work with it, I mean, you're going to use some of your consciousness, obviously. It's not a complete instinctual process. So a good place to start is, well, I know I want to choose Mercury first, so even thinking about these questions, can I track it? Because that's a real Mercury thing. And in any situation, can I track it? Mercury is not so interested in situations where it can't track it. Or is it witty enough, or does it make sense? Can I figure it out? And of course the moon, a whole different set of questions there. I've had a bunch of clients recently that with their creativity is an issue, and like it maybe hasn't come to its full expression. So sun is a beautiful example of one, of something to bring in there. And I think just a simple question like, is there enough energy in it for me? That's a solar question. So if you can know also by using these what part of you is leading the show. I mean, and some of us have a pretty good feel, but sometimes I know I'll be like, whoa, where am I in this situation? And some of these questions even help me to say, okay, this is my Saturnian facet really operating here. And it helps me hone in quicker to say, do I want to be here? Maybe that's the best choice, but actually maybe shifting a little more into my Jupiter suit, it helps me in this particular situation. For example, I had a job interview recently and it was really difficult for me and I found myself being very, very Saturnian. Had I in that interview, which I was not able to stay with myself enough and get centered enough to do this, but had I been able to say, let me shift a little bit more into Jupiter in that particular situation, it would have shown a different part of me and it would have been more, it would have been a nice change. Yeah. So, but we tend to do what we've always done. So choosing a planet first is having the guts to say, I'm actually going to choose something I don't normally do. There's the Venus and the Mars, the Jupiter and the Saturn. It's funny, I chose Mercury as my planet to be doing first over this last year. Well, and then I had this sudden realization that I thought, I don't think I'm doing Mercury first. I think I'm doing Uranus first. I think maybe I chose, I didn't know what I was choosing, which I figured was very, very Uranian. I mean, if I didn't know what I was choosing, but that's something else I just want to say that I don't yet have this honed down to some, like I'm playing with it still. So there's a lot of room. I think that the outer planets, choosing them first, are a little more nebulous. They're not as concrete to choose, which does not mean I don't think we should choose them, but I think when I'm working with people and myself, that choosing the personal planets first is perhaps a good bridge. And I didn't include Pluto at all because I'm not even sure how I would use it in here. I feel like it's not particularly classifiable. I mean, it represents the soul, which can be big, so I don't include it in here. And then I spoke about aspects a little bit, but it's just now that the function of the psyche represented by the planet you chose first now determines how the planets and aspect are experienced. So doesn't change any of the aspects of the relationships, it changes your relationship with those. And that's the whole idea of planets first. It's changing your relationship with yourself and your own wiring. Okay. Olive, are you on here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. So, are you excited?
Yeah, of course.
Well, because it's funny, I was having a conversation with my partner earlier today, and I was saying, it's funny. I'm like, we can choose a planet first, and sometimes that's how we reveal to ourselves how much we actually don't want to have anything to do, with that particular planet, or how much we're actually willing to do it. But you did choose Saturn first.
Yeah, and I still like it. Like, I still want to, be Saturn first.
Yeah.
I think it's a good planet for me to choose on the first. I just wish I would use it a little more, or
Yeah. So
put the more to use it.
So I think anytime you choose a planet first, it's helpful, especially if you're working with a client, if you're going to start using this technique to really talk about some agreement around what that planet or what that part of yourself signifies. And so this is why I throw in, this is how I do it. I say, okay, not that this is every single word about Saturn, but these are some things that, that Saturn does signify for us. And so all of choosing Saturn, from a Saturn first perspective, that function assumes that everything should be practical, respectable, and achieving something. I mean, among other things, but that's a huge focus of that part of us. And so choosing Saturn first is living life through the realistic responsibility and achievement function. I think the importance of goals and getting things done is increased because the I, or the AC, is now married to the hard worker and the cosmic parent. And all of you and I have talked a lot about, parenting yourself, or, being a parent. And in your chart, this is Olive's natal chart. I wanted to first just take a look at it on its own. You can see that, perfectly, Saturn's conjunct the North Node. So this is an example of a signature that if I was working with Olive as a client, it would make perfect sense to say, wow, Saturn is really up there on something that you've chosen to learn. And I try to stay away from saying things like, that you need to learn, because that may be true, but we've chosen, we choose. So in this pattern, we can see, hey, that's something that she really wants to do. And, what I like about it even more is when we move Saturn to the first. So you can see both of them. When we move Saturn to the first, and then it brings her North Node with it to the first. So for her to choose this, it takes a lot of courage to say, not only am I going to choose a planet first, that is not something I've been particularly comfortable with or had to deal with because I was busy with other things in past lifetimes or this lifetime. I'm also going to bring the North Node, which is something that I'm, growing into or becoming in this lifetime. And that brings all that Aries in addition up there. So that's a lot of, I don't know how to do this. I'm not an expert at this. And there can be a sense of clumsiness around it, especially with the North Node in Aries. So how do you imagine it might feel to have Saturn bumped up with clumsiness, or that sort of like the needing to just sort of, act on things, because Saturn, just as a part of our psyche, is not the part that just wants to act clumsily. It wants to act from a place of experience and expertise and mastery. So I would imagine, and we'll have Olive tell us, but I would imagine that there's some extreme uncomfortability around this. And maybe some of the things that we've talked a bit about, Olive, but things like exhaustion, sometimes depression, all the things that Saturn brings up when we say, oh my God, Especially because with Saturn, there can be feeling that I can't do it. How has it felt? How has it felt for you?
So yeah, I feel, well, for one thing, somewhat off the subject, I feel like when I chose this Saturn, like, it was so instinctual for me to choose it. I've always had Capricorn, either 10th house, strong 10th house Capricorn, or Saturnian people around me, really ever since I was a little girl. So it's definitely a lesson, and I can use the word that's something I need. It's always, it's definitely something I need and something that I chose. So it's both something I need because I chose it. And so I really like the idea of Saturn on the first. I like the way my chart looks with Saturn on the first. And I just also feel like maybe, because I've told you, Tara, that I believe, we choose everything. And so I believe that just you even, doing these planets on the first and me choosing Saturn is kind of all part of the journey, right? It was really just kind of meant to be that I would choose Saturn on the first, because right now is the time that I need to implement it most, or at least all that kind of Saturnian stuff. I need to get serious about being an adult and standing on my own 2 feet and having, taking the initiative, Aries, to do so, and really learn to parent myself, like the cosmic parent. So yeah. I really like the way it looks. I want to be maybe a little more disciplined, right, Saturnian, about, trying to, at least on a subconscious level, incorporate it into my daily life. I don't think it's worked as well, but also I haven't been that conscious. I haven't really been focused on it. I've, forgot about a follow-up, all that kind of stuff. But since Monday I told you I was going to try to you know, try to do it this week. And I did a little bit of the Saturn on first,
Yeah.
but not as much as I would like to.
But I think
Go ahead.
Well, no, I just, as you're saying it, what I feel like it's really, I feel for you, it's not just Saturn, it's the Aries with the Saturn, because what you're moving from, all, I mean, I don't like when I say moving from. We're not moving from anything. We're trying to become more whole. But from a perspective standpoint, the Gemini, you know, your Gemini rising, all your Gemini, it does love the idea of things. And it's super smart. You can almost like think yourself into thinking things that, you know, that like sometimes Gemini can actually trick itself into thinking that things are happening just because it's thinking through them. So when you said I like the idea of Saturn first, I thought, that's perfect. That's your normal Gemini. So what is Aries? Aries says, shut up and do it. Aries is.
I was disappointed when you said that you actually incorporate, because you choosing to incorporate like the Leo with the Aries or whatever you were saying earlier. I forgot the signage, but I actually want to ditch. Like, so I chose Saturn on the first to ditch my Gemini altogether. I'm over it. So
and you should trust your instinct to do that.
Yeah, like I'm hoping not. Like with me implementing this Saturn on the first, I'm really trying to get away from the Gemini and go more towards the Aries, like, you know, Capricorn, kind of Saturnian.
Yeah, but
so I wasn't a fan of the mix.
Yeah, I guess what partly is, I would say we can't leave it behind. Like you can choose to say I'm going to stand here, but like it's part of it's your wiring. But if you can give your Gemini legs, meaning actually like to take it somewhere.
Right, with the Aries of energy.
And Saturn, because Saturn also does it have legs. So I'm saying, so you've got like this huge power pack sitting there now. When you bring that North Node with Saturn to, I don't know, like I guess I would ask you, do you really want to choose it? Because it might mean you actually have to start really doing it.
No, I'm actually really comfortable with choosing it. I think just intuitively, I just instinctually chose it because I know that's what I need. And so it wasn't even a minute, but thinking about what planet I would want there. And I immediately chose, you know, my Saturn North Node. So I'm actually very comfortable with it there. And it's just that, you know, going off of, you know, some of like even what Aaron was talking about, it's like I do have a fixed band cross, and it is very hard for me to, I'm not an ambitious or goal-oriented person. I'm really nothing Saturnian. I have no, you know, desire to achieve success or like, I've never been goal-oriented. I have no desire to be goal-oriented about anything, but right now I have to, you know, and like I was telling you on Sunday with Pluto, like square my nodal axis, it's like, you know, the resolution node is my south node in the fifth. And so it's like, I feel like I have to kind of go backwards, if you will, and kind of pick up some of these Saturnian, more kind of really consensus kind of practices and apply them and like do the work, right? Saturn, it requires me to do the work. And I'm so flippin' Neptunian and just like me and just where I've just always kind of been, it's very hard for me to motivate, you know, to actually do the work. And because I'm so Neptunian and have a lot going on, it's like I'm just simply so overwhelmed. You know what I mean? That it's really hard for me to kind of apply it. But I do want that there, and I see where it's like, you know, necessary if I'm able to, you know, better apply it or hold it there and think about it a little bit and try to implement it, take the Aries kind of Aryan energy to do it. And, you know, maybe even with like, you know, enthusiasm, you know, like try to do it. It's just so hard for me to do anything at all. You know, I told you, like, everything's just, you know, very difficult right now. So I definitely want to keep it there and maybe be more mindful of it and, you know, try to work with it more.
Yeah, will you share a little bit with everybody? I know you mentioned to me that even as you were choosing, because, you know, I like to poke at you, and I said, okay, but I see all these things in your life where over the past 6 months you have been doing Saturnian things where, and even things that I know that you weren't doing before. And your response was, yeah, but I'm doing them in a Neptunian way. So
totally.
You talk
Yeah,
about that?
seeing
'Cause
everything.
it doesn't negate it,
It.
though.
I wish that it was more Saturnian. I would have done things so much better. And, you know, like everything I've done just really in the last like 5 years practically is just so heavily Neptunian and overwhelmed. And just, I'm just, you know, like I'm also like, you know, in that menopausal phase of life, right? Making everything so much. So it's like, and until you get there, you know, it's really, and with all my Gemini, it's a bad, you know, time to like, you know, really try to hunker down and do some Saturn stuff.
Yeah, what happens in your body? Like when you let's go back to some of these, I don't know, like questions of Saturn. Okay, so what happens in your body when you come from a place of, you know, am I getting something done? Like if you just ask that of yourself, am I getting something done? Like, do you notice, does something happen in your body? Like, do you feel more tired even than before?
I mean, you know, I'll be honest, I don't focus on myself a lot or my transits really, or like what my body feels like. I'm not very, you know, which could also be a good Saturn thing for me to, you know, like I say, be more mindful, you know, focus more on, you know, how I, you know, am doing that or what my body does feel like, you know, all that kind of stuff. But I've always been, like I say, it's like I'm not that, you know, you'll notice I'm all cadent house too. You know what I mean? It's not like I'm, you know, I've got Pluto in a cardinal house, obviously, and he's really the strongest planet, but, you know, tight yod with Pluto, all 20 degrees. But I'm very cadent and just very, you know, just kind of, so I really don't really think too much about how something feels. I definitely feel, you know, like I feel maybe a sense of relief when I get like one small thing done.
Yeah, but that's huge.
Lately I've been doing like one thing a day. Like since I saw you on Sunday, I've been, because I told you I would try to really implement it this week, and been trying to like wake up in the morning and get at least one thing done that's like kind of Saturnian, you know, and take that Saturn first and implement it first thing in the morning. Then it goes away and I go right back to Neptune. But it, you know, I don't really, I guess I can't really answer that because I don't really notice and I don't really focus on, you know, how I feel about anything really. So
yeah, and to me, Saturn, it does represent focus.
Right, and so that's why.
Even if you got nothing, I guess this is what I would say. Like, I understand that it's easy to look and say, well, I took on a task and I didn't do it that well or whatnot. But even choosing to focus, and even if the focus isn't on something yet that manifests a full achievement, just choosing to focus is already a huge step towards that North Node conjunct Saturn. You know, just the choice of I'm going to focus.
Yeah, but I mean, I do focus, like, so for instance, like a little, like you're talking about, I've been focused on that for like over a year, you know what I mean? So like the focus was there, like the focus was so there that it was like an overwhelming focus, like constantly like.
I don't mean on Saturn, I just mean on, you know, on yourself or to pick something to focus on.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't have good focus because I'm kind of, you know, very mutable Gemini, like where I'm kind of all over the place. When I focus, I do focus pretty well to where it's like, you know, I'm also really strong Virgo. So it becomes like real obsessional and like too much of a focus, like, you know, over the top, like focus to where I can't.
Well, yeah, no, because Virgo's small. Yeah, Saturn. Saturn can see a bigger picture.
Yeah. Yeah. So I kind of really live off that, you know, 6th 12th house axis, like just, you know, focus and then overwhelm, focus and then overwhelm, or, you know, just very, very Neptunian, like very just, I'm very 12th house in many ways. I'm also similarly not very 12th house in a lot of ways. So, but I'm very Neptunian and, you know, I lack focus. That's why I actually, when I look at the Saturn on first, I'm taking the Gemini out. I'm not mixing that Gemini with this Aries.
Yeah.
That's how I'll focus on it.
Yeah.
And I like the way my chart looks because it's all about me learning to kind of be an adult and self-sufficient for my security and my survival, right? So I like how my planets go in the second house with the Saturn on first. So there's a lot of things,
Yeah.
you know, I like about it.
And that's a great, so here's what's awesome about that. This is a good point. And I didn't talk about this before, and in part one, we just ran out of time, but looking at where things fall in the houses when you choose a planet first is really important because it gives you new opportunity for those planets. So you're right. So your Sun, Mars, and Mercury that normally sit in the 12th house, now they're in the second house, which means there's a lot more availability for embodiment of those things. You know, so
yeah,
even the Gemini,
and the fifth, you know, I mean, there's a lot of things I like. Yeah. My moon's in the 10th, you know, like it's like there's a lot of things I like about it. I definitely, like I say, obviously instinctually, I'm going to always live, like, unfortunately, Gemini on the ascendant, Mercury conjunct, you know, but at the same time, in this, when I try to focus on this a little bit more, and maybe we'll have a follow-up again, and I'll try to implement it more, is that I'm definitely trying to, at least my intention is to kind of take the Gemini out and have more of that instinctual kind of energy, Aries, and not so dispersed all over the place Gemini, you know?
Yes, and for you, that choice is a perfect example of choosing a focus, and that sounds like an awesome way to support yourself.
Yeah, so that's what I'll for sure try to do.
Because Christy, one thing about all that mutability and you know, all those things is that it can be, you know, sometimes it's about just simplifying, you know, really.
Right.
Because it's an example of where just choosing too much, you know, choosing too much.
Right.
It's interesting. Like Aries, think about just Aries raw energy. It's like a straight line of fire energy just going forward in one straightforward direction.
Right.
That is so different than anything mutable that is like everything shooting arrows every direction out from the circle.
Yeah.
So in some ways, Aries for some people, you know, it's funny to use focus because, you know, Aries has so many different, you know, permeations, but in many ways, Aries is a focus and it's streaming consciousness in one straight direction.
Right.
So I think at this point in time, I don't know how you get everything done or how you do it is less the issue. It's getting in that zone of I'm focused and I'm choosing to take my life force and my energy and shoot it in that one direction. And that's a combination of Saturn and Aries. And I love that for you. So if you have to put like the hold on Gemini.
Yeah, I would like to.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, like I'm totally obviously comfortable with my Gemini because I've had it all my life. And, but at the same time, I would like to put it away for a bit.
Well, yeah, but you know, part of it is like, I mean, you're already super smart. You have lots of information. Like you don't need to put more things together. Not in that way. Not right now. But that's how I see it. It's more about now picking something and you go.
I mean, I do think that just, you know, in the past, like, I mean, like I say, I believe we choose everything. And so just even, you know, me, you know, choosing this, like, you know, 48 years later, like to put Saturn on the first is a choice I made prior to my incarnation. I mean, that's how I believe it. So, and it's really applicable to what I'm going through right now. So I find it, you know, fascinating. I mean, maybe what I'll do is print my chart out. My printer's broken, but maybe I'll try to print it out and like post it like somewhere, you know, to where I can look at it more and have it be more a focus.
One thing I would love to hear back, and maybe we could talk about it, and maybe more people want to try it and share their experiences, and we can kind of keep playing around with this technique. But for me, that Saturn in Aries ultimately is I'm taking charge of myself. So I would love to hear back from you over time how that's playing out. And sometimes taking charge of yourself is totally knowing you're choosing to go to your, you know, dispersing or your mutability. That, you know what I'm saying? Like taking charge doesn't mean that we're always doing, you know, the perfect thing or some kind of right or some kind of wrong thing. Taking charge means like I'm inhabiting myself and I'm choosing.
Right.
You know, so therefore I think that Saturn maybe sometimes can look like something other than Saturn, but when we're coming from a place of I'm in charge and choosing,
right,
you know, that's different. There's like, that's that's being sovereign. That's being our own authority. And I think this is a big part for you is this. So it's not so much to me, did you carry out that particular function in a Neptunian way? It's, did you do that from a place of choosing and not just a place from overwhelm? Because you and I have talked about overwhelm.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, some of that stuff though, I really did do from a place like of overwhelm. Like, yeah. So, I mean, I'm definitely, but I do think that is all significant. I think it's really significant that, that I definitely have to learn to like parent myself. And I don't have the tools, by the way. Like, I didn't have parents to like teach me. And then it's also no secret that here it is like a full like Saturn return since I moved out of the house at 18, so that's interesting too, and has been, for a while, and where I'm literally basically like an 18-year-old moving out of the house with no tools. So it's like I have to kind of find these tools in order to like adult up and stand on my own 2 feet and really survive and be self-sufficient and, get stuff done, like do the work. Yeah.
Well, I think it's really scary. That's why I said it takes a lot of courage to do that, especially with Moon Aries as being I have to try it for myself. It's scary when you have no history to draw upon, at least that you can feel to draw upon. No history.
Yeah. And also there's the problem of I really don't have a lot of desire. So like that's the thing is like I'm not. Again, like I've never, my whole life, I'm not competitive. I don't have goals. I'm not someone who wants to achieve success. Like I just kind of am someone who, very Neptunian. Like I give everything away and, I'm just I'm not someone who is not, like I don't, there's very few things that I really desire. Like I just don't desire to really do the work, but I have to do the work. And so that's why I think this skip step with Pluto right now, this temporary skip step and all this kind of stuff kind of goes back, backwards to the South Node resolution. And, there's just a lot of work that needs to be done. And, I either sink or I swim, you know what I mean? So,
well, and the South Node resolution, I mean, it's conjunct Ceres and that's, feeding and nurturing yourself. That's parenting as well. So you can't you can't get away from it.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I guess I have support right now because I think Ceres is on my Venus,
Nice.
trying my natal Pluto and my moon. So.
But you might find that the more that you choose in little ways to be in charge or to choose a certain focus or to choose to just do something, you might find that some of that ambition or some of that drive, like it might start to reveal itself.
I don't have it.
I hear you.
Yeah.
But maybe you can even hold room for maybe that it's possible.
Maybe. But I just don't, I've never had it like since a baby and I aspire it. That's the thing. So there's that, it's like I have to do this work. And so I'm happy to choose Saturn there and I'm very comfortable with it there, by the way. Like I say, I love the way my chart looks with that. I mean, if this was an artificial chart, I'd be doing the work all my life, I guess.
Yeah.
But it is artificial. So I've got to really kind of try to choose to do it. I just, it's like, I want to, have it somewhere in the back of my head and try to keep it in the, somewhere where I can at least try to do it. Cause I really do have to do this work. Like I have to get some stuff done. And as much as I don't desire to do it, it's like, it must be done. So there's really not an option,
No, and with Saturn first, when Venus moves into the first house, it means the essential need is really to be in relationship with yourself, and all that stuff in the second house. That's self-sufficiency, self-reliance. So it's interesting for you when you choose Saturn first. Really, lots of things support you in that choice. We can see that by the houses that it sits into.
Right. I like it, and that's why I instinctually chose it. And really, I'm probably on some level, thinking like there's just no. It's not by chance that you like that, that I'm trying to implement this, or that you even, have chosen this kind of, astrology niche. And me, applying it to my chart with Saturn. I just think it's very much something that I'm supposed to do right now, and we'll see if I can, do some of the stuff, try to get it, try to do some of the work.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting. I do know that there is too with like intent or just kind of, thinking about something or being mindful of it, and then it just kind of actually unfolding. So I'm definitely open to that.
Yeah. Well, I just
and
think
some of like, go ahead. What?
I was just gonna say, I think that the more that you do things, whether they're marked as successful or not, but the more that you actually are, instead of being that's a good idea or thinking about, the more you actually do things, I think that door will open more. Whether or not you choose it, who knows, I mean, it doesn't matter. I just think that there's more room. That's my point here. There's more room. And this chart, to me, Saturn on the first shows me how much room that there really is. And so it'd be curious to see, come some months into it when you've played around with it more, to see if you feel even a little bit of more spaciousness around it.
Yeah, I definitely, I mean, we'll see what happens. I'm just, remember, it's like that fixed cross is very strong. It's like my chart can be misleading because there's so much mutable air, but I'm really just a fixed grand cross.
Yeah, but what does Aries want? Aries wants to start a brand new evolutionary cycle.
Right.
But I'm saying, until you allow, part of Saturn is you got to give yourself permission. This is all these things talk about Saturn, about authority, permission, and rules. It's all about doing those things for yourself. I know you know this, but to me, there's an element of saying, I give myself permission to do something new. I don't know if I want to do it or not, or if I'm going to like it or not, but I give myself permission to do something new.
Right.
Dude, there's just a lot. That's a little powerhouse in Aries.
Mhm.
And Mars is all about desire, and it's interesting that the very things that you say you've never had, it takes a certain amount of energy. Like, even
what have I never had? I forgot.
Oh no, you said like you don't ambition or drive or that kinds of thing.
I don't have.
Well, maybe not in the traditional way, but in some ways you do have. There are certain things, we have conversations where you have a definite idea of what you want or don't want. So maybe
that is true.
Yeah.
That is true. But it could be.
It doesn't have to be traditional ambition or drive.
Yeah, and there's really nothing really that traditional about me anyway. I'm very Uranian too, so yeah, I can see that. I think, I definitely see what you're saying, and I think I do that. I think that I think that I do, have obviously, like, as we all do, grow into the North Node, and I think I've been doing that for a long time, really since 27, since like my second nodal reverse is kind of, a long time ago, where you kind of go more into, I think around 27, we all kind of learn to balance the nodes a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely, would like to have some of that Aryan energy and, and
I think
Saturnian discipline.
Yeah, and I keep coming back to it. Just really feels like a lot of it is just being, having the, I'm choosing. And even if I'm choosing that I don't want to be more ambitious, that's a choice. And that's different than coming from a, this is just what I have, or this is what I know, or this is, there's something.
Yeah. I hear, and I do believe all that. And I do believe that that is kind of, we just evolve like transits anyway. And so I believe in choice. It's just that, how I feel, and most astrologers don't feel the way I do, because I'm very fatalistic, where I believe if I did a better choice, then I'll do the better choice. But if I haven't, it'll just kind of go as planned, Yeah. I'm very much in the belief that although we always have the choice and free will, it's like I don't so much believe that we necessarily have the choice and free will in this lifetime. Once we're incarnated, it's kind of like a, like set in motion, like a, domino effect. And we just, if I make a great choice tomorrow that's very Saturnian, then that's just the way I chose it prior to my incarnation. And I realize that most people don't believe that way, but no one can really prove to me otherwise. So I'm open to someone proving that to me, but I don't think anyone can. So that's just my belief. And
Yeah.
I think that's also kind of hard for me to consciously make a choice because it'll either happen or it won't. And so I can, do kind of, I guess in some ways, I just believe that most people wouldn't get out of bed if they thought, that things weren't going to get better or they weren't going to make better choices. You know what I mean? So I think that most people are under the belief that they have this like free will and choice. I think that the astrological chart is simply a tool to kind of tap into what we've written for ourselves, if you will. And then we make better choices on reading, kind of what we wrote. But that, again, that's just my belief. And I realize that most people don't have those same beliefs, but yeah, let's, from your lips to God's ears, let's hope that I make better choices, or that I chose prior to make better choices now.
Well, and maybe, and Saturn has a lot to do with, our reality and our limits and our definitions, like our own edges, all those pieces.
Right.
So I hear everything that you just said, and I don't know that I have an attachment to it being, true or not true, but I think that in the middle of everything, regardless of whatever philosophy we have, like there is room for us, and Saturn in some ways represents those edges, and whether we want to make those boundaries bigger or make those boundaries smaller, in many ways, that also is Saturnian. So maybe part of your journey is to feel what control you actually do or don't have around those pieces, in the structure of your philosophy, which is another interesting thing to play around with. How much am I in charge?
Right. I believe I'm fully in charge. I just believe that it'll unfold the way it unfolds. You know what I mean? I just believe that.
Yeah.
I believe no matter how crappy, like I'm in a really shitty transit phase right now, but I believe I don't feel a victim. It's like I chose it for my soul's evolution. So there's no way to have it any other way. And so, I might, and I believe that the Saturn on the 1st is implemented into my whole choosing. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
I think that there's almost no way I can't implement it to some degree, or else I wouldn't know you. I wouldn't have chosen it. You know what I mean? All these things kind of, it's just all connected is what I'm saying. And so
I totally agree. And I think that Saturn on the 1st conjunct the North Node in Aries says, all that's true, but you do have more charge over the form that it takes than you might have experienced already, which I think the form doesn't necessarily change the overall. I would totally agree with you that of course you are doing what you're doing, but I think that Saturn there says there's some sort of new form, and maybe you have more charge over the form it takes. It's like we're going from A to B, right? Yeah.
Say as I chose to have more form right now at this current phase in my life, to choose to like try to implement Saturn on the 1st. So it's all really, we're all saying the same thing. It's just that I am very fatalistic.
Well,
I believe
that and also,
fate.
But also Neptune doesn't want any form. It's like there's different ways to experience things. You could experience the same evolution from I'm more out of my body, I'm less attached to form, I'm just letting it go, and then there'd be a whole other experience of I'm going to choose to be more in my body, feel my edges, and have the form be this way. It doesn't, to me, change the outcome. That's where I think we're totally agreeing. I just think it's interesting that you have these things in here, because I think there's a different space for you to experience the evolution through or in.
Right.
And that's what I'd love to hear back on more as you are, playing around with it, especially that contrast between your Neptunian, wiring and tendencies to, gee, what's it like when I actually choose a form, or, choose to take a direct action, or, whatever those Saturnian things may be.
Right.
You might find you like it.
Yeah. Yeah. If it manifests, then great. We'll see. But yeah, I definitely hear everything you're saying, and agree. It'll either my soul chose wisely to implement this Saturn on the 1st, which I believe, it did. Like, I just believe we're always exactly where we're supposed to be all the time. Or how crappy it is, every negative experience is like we choose. Like we can't really blame people for Like, you know, I chose my narcissistic father and my alcoholic mother. You know, these things are what I chose. My soul has to go through it. Otherwise, you know, we end up with skipped steps, I guess, you know?
Yeah, but we do, but are we
force evolution?
No.
We can't like force evolution or, you know, try to like evolve. It's like, we can evolve just sitting on the couch. Like, we don't have to really do anything. It's just kind of all revealed as the soul grows. That's how I look at it anyway.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that in each of those moments, like what we do have, we get to choose our relationship with the moment, you know, so the thing may be happening, but how I relate to it, you know, I get to choose how I relate to the moment. And I mean, like nothing's doing anything to us, right? We're doing everything to ourselves, but we get to choose in each moment how we want to relate to that. And so like a Neptunian way of doing it is just very different than a Saturnian way. To me, it doesn't actually necessarily change anything.
Right.
But the experience you're having.
And we're just, anyway, so like, I'm saying exactly really the same thing you're saying. It's like, to me, it's just all very natural, and it just manifests in the way it's meant to be. So I'm very much, obviously, you know, living to some extent Saturn on the 1st because I've chosen it. It's just that I haven't really, like, you know, and who knows, like, you know, what triggers that point, you know, like, you know, progress chart, like my chant, like everything, like something will trigger that and then maybe sets the ball in motion.
Yep.
And I, you know, do some work, you know what I mean? Get some work done.
Yeah, on whatever level and whatever that means, you know.
Exactly. Exactly. I wonder if someone else, really quick, if we have time.
Questions. Yeah, I don't know if we have any time for questions either.
We've got a few minutes. We can make some time, Tara. What would you like to do?
Open it up if anybody has anything they want to share or ask or add.
Could you please stop the share, and then we'll go back to the panel. Great, thank you. I just wanted to say about Olive's chart that her Saturn is in the 11th house, and in a sense, you're bringing that 11th house to the 1st house. So the 11th house doesn't like to be pigeonholed, doesn't like to be told anything really. So I feel that with Olive, something is being birthed, but it'll be birthed in her right time, and it'll be very unusual and very unique. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
I can say something. Am I unmuted?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hi. I have an 11th house sun, Olive, so I resonate with you. But when I look at your Gemini rising, and I have 4 planets in Gemini, I think the hardest thing that I've had to learn in my life is to listen. And I finally heard that the key word for Aquarius in the 11th house from Jeffrey was objectivity and listening. And I started howling with laughter that day, and I went, oh my God. And so all of that, I would share that with you, that it was a difficult lesson, but I've been listening for hours, quietly.
Yeah, I have that too, also with all the, you know, the Gemini, so.
Yeah, Gemini rising, they say, is even chattier than Sun in Gemini. Moon in Gemini,
I'm
the chattiest.
I'm absolutely ridiculous. Like, I am just so, like, ridiculously, like wordy.
I love to talk, Olive, so I can always talk to you.
I mean, I have, like, Mercury, Mars, and a Gemini, and it's all, like, there's no form or structure or containment like Saturn, right? Because it's all in the 12th house. So it's not, like, this contained, like, chatter. It's like this real all over the place, you know, it's like pouring a bunch of words out to the sea, you know, Neptune. It's very Neptunian, like my Gemini there. So if my Gemini were, you know, in the 6th house, like those planets, or 10th house, obviously I'd be a completely different soul, but I'd at least have some structure and containment to my, you know, excessive wordage.
Well,
so,
I think the listening part, I have South Node in Gemini, so I have my own good dose of it, but the listening is not just external, it's internal too, because that chatter for me, I find that on the outside, listening has been a big lesson, but on the inside, even listening to myself, like in a true, clear, focused way, is not always easy with the Gemini, but the Saturn can help, with that piece of taking responsibility,
Yeah.
or even being with yourself that way. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I agree, Tara. That's why I really like this Saturn on the 1st. Like, I really like it. I wish I had been born with this chart, right? Because then things would be so different than they're beginning to work.
Well, but I mean,
obviously I'm fine with my chart, but I'm just saying, like, it would be, obviously I'd be a completely different person if I had that chart, but it'd be nice if I could.
Astrocartography?
Nice, Tashi.
What?
You say it.
You say something? Astrocartography, what?
Choosing locations.
Oh yeah, I don't really know a lot about that. I'd imagine I don't want to live on a Pluto line, but I definitely.
Don't move to your Pluto line. I traveled to visit my Pluto line in the 70s when I first met Louis, and I got punched in the eye in my Pluto midheaven line. It was really good. I mean, it wasn't nice to be punched in the eye, but it really woke me up. So. Yeah,
I always wonder where. I know I'm kind of close to a Jupiter line, but Jupiter transits aren't good for me, so I'm a little bit over Seattle, so we'll see. Like, I'm not so into Seattle lately, but yeah, I would love to get like an astrocartography read. I don't really know a lot about it.
Okay.
I mean, I know
other
the basics.
questions or any comments? And if not, Tara can then wind down. Any other comments?
Thank you, everybody.
All right. Thank you so much, Tara. That was fantastic. And Olive, that was great.
Bye.
I'm needing everybody to say
a lot of good
thanks.
information.
Thank you.
That was awesome. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thank you
Bye,
so
everyone.
much.